All right, everybody, welcome to the Data Center News Show. I am here with my friends in the house. We are going to talk about all things data center related, and we're talking markets today. We're going to talk about all the cool things about happening in the market since I have my AY friends here and they just released their market report, so might as well. It's news. It is news. It is news. All right, but before we get into that, I'll let my friends introduce themselves. So, Steven, you go first. Is he frozen, Howie? He's frozen.
No, he didn't freeze. He just likes to smile like that.
I am always afraid if I'm frozen, I'm in like such a bad thing. All right, there he wait.
He nodded. He nodded. Here he comes.
He nodded. He's coming back. That's crazy town. He's in Dallas. How hard can this be? Go, Howie. Go, sir.
All right. Howard Berry, Avison Young here. We got more.
We got more. Josh showed up. Keep going, Howie. Introduce yourself.
All right. Avison Young running the National Data Center Platform for AY with my cohort Steven Schlenker out of Dallas. I'm in the Silicon Valley.
Very cool. And Steven is still, I think he's coming back. Oh, we got the circle of death.
Josh.
There he is. There he is. And there's Josh. All right. Before you freeze again, go, Steven. Introduce people.
I'm Steven Schlenker. I had spent about the previous 5 years at Data Center Hawk as one of the senior analysts covering markets and writing about what's happening in each market. And now I'm working with Howard Berry at Avison Young, working on transactions in the data center space.
Very cool. And Josh is on the show. Hey, Josh.
Hi, Amy. Great to see you. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. I work with sales, marketing professionals, product channel partnership professionals, and a lot of founders and entrepreneurs about go-to-market and growth strategies for data centers, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure. Came to this space about 10 years ago as a byproduct of seeing managed service providers reinvent themselves and move more heavily into co-location data centers. I also host the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
And I subscribe to you.
Awesome.
I listen to it. It's a great show.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks, Howard. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it.
Very cool. So we are going to talk markets today. We got the right people in the house. All right. So who wrote the report? I want to know who wrote it wasn't Howie. Howie doesn't write reports. Do you write, Howard?
No, I just advise. Howard Huang.
Howard Huang, the other Howard. He wrote the report.
He does our fine reporting, and it's no surprise that there's growth in the data center market.
Oh, shocker.
Yeah. We saw some growth.
So the one I was looking through it before we started the show, and the one thing that I guess kind of surprised me, maybe not surprised me, but the one who absorbed the most vacancy was Dallas. So it's because Steven's in Dallas. Everybody, just so you know, it's all due to Steven Schlenker. Because in the other kind of markets, it was more Austin, San Antonio, but I was surprised Dallas was on the list. I'm not surprised, but I thought Austin would have beat out Dallas, but it didn't. So maybe there's just more space over there. Who knows? Maybe Austin ran out of buildings, and so Dallas has more buildings that are hanging out. What other big
Steven, what do you got, Steven? Because Steven was the senior analyst over at Data Center Hawk, and he knows the market better than most.
Dallas has always been a bigger market than Austin. And so it's, even though there's lots of tech companies in Austin, the Dallas data center market has always been one of the central hubs of the country. And so I think that Austin will continue to grow, but the demand has tended toward Dallas. A lot of the hyperscale end users are doing a lot in Dallas right now, and they're kind of emerging as tenants in the Austin area in San Antonio. And so both of those are growing. There's lots of land being acquired, power being applied for. But the leasing in Dallas, it's a lot of pre-leasing right now. A lot of pre-leasing to hyperscale end users, and there's a lot of AI leases that are going on.
Yeah, so I would assume because Dallas is such a financial center that would make sense, right? Because there's and the Texas stock exchange is there now, and you're going to just have, most of the major financial institutions are located in Dallas. So my question is, what's edge? If somebody locates a data center in Dallas and they're based in Austin, is that edgy enough? Is that too far away? I mean, where's the latency? Where does the latency drop off?
Austin's big enough that it's its own market. Edge it's going to be different anyone you ask, but I would say that, I think that the simplest way to define edge is that you're closer to the end user than the hub. But we would say that there's a gravity kind of to data centers in general. Part of the reason that Northern Virginia is so big, that Silicon Valley was so big previously, is because it's easier to build where there's current infrastructure, where there's current fiber, and end users are more comfortable expanding in markets than growing to new markets. That has to do with kind of personnel as well as just what you currently have in workloads. It's easier to, and so groups are getting more comfortable going to the fringes, but I would say in general, because Dallas has been bigger in the past, it'll continue to be bigger than Austin, but I do expect Austin to be one of the primary markets in the US. There's a lot of interest. There's lots of groups that are, every data center company who doesn't have a footprint in Texas wants to be in Dallas and Austin.
Yeah. And we're talking co-location right now. So as far as growth, those calculations are all in co-location, not on hyperscale.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. So let's get
co-location leasing is what is over 300 megawatts.
Yeah. So out of your report, what would be? I'm assuming y'all read it before the other Howard published it. What are the 3 big takeaways from the report, by the way? And by the way, I'll do some shameless plugging. If y'all want a copy of this report, these 2 boys are the ones you reach out to. So, but out of your data center market report, what are the kind of 3 big takeaways you think?
Well, lease rates are not, they're not decreasing. They're only increasing. They're going up as demand is still there and vacancy drops.
Yeah.
Even when we see Microsoft and AWS dropping space that they maybe blocked other people from, there's other groups coming in and picking up that inventory.
I saw the cute little statement that construction slowed down a little bit in Q1, but everybody was just taking a breather because it was going so damn fast that everybody just needed to go for a second, right, to keep going. I thought that was pretty cute. And the other one I thought was pretty funny was the vacancy rate. Like Phoenix was the highest vacancy rate. And I love the graph because it looks really, really big. And then you look at the number, it's like 1.3% or something. It's like nothing. It's like they're,
everything is 1.6.
Super small. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And we're talking about Phoenix, and guess who shows up? Hi, Gino. How are you?
Hey.
That's super cool. All right. Welcome to the house. So Joshua, tell us a little bit about your organization for people who might not know, and especially, as new people into the industry. Tell us a little bit what DCSMI, it's a lot of letters.
The Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute is all about empowering marketers, sales professionals, channel partnership professionals, product managers, and founders, entrepreneurs, and relatively small companies who take an active role in go-to-market. We know over the past 5 or 10 years, the world is increasingly moving in a lot of sectors towards self-service, where especially in commoditized categories, people are getting really deep into the journey before they're open to having a sales conversation. And this changes the nature of where companies are investing in growth. We see a lot of companies taking some of their commoditized products and moving them to self-service, self-onboarding, and restructuring teams to focus more on mid-market and enterprise opportunities. We continue to see a lot of companies, especially in the operator and the technology and the facility space, segmenting by vertical as well, where they'll take some expertise and they'll have a team specialized in like healthcare and manufacturing and telecommunications, because they know there's just so much more competition for attention. So yeah, we work with companies all over the world. Originally, it started more very US centric, but in the past 2-3 years, it's morphed into a lot more throughout EMEA and even throughout Asia Pacific. It turns out a lot of the business development challenges are fairly consistent across the board. A lot of the approaches to sustainability are quite different. We put out a roundup last week themed with Earth Day on top 14 sustainability, data center sustainability approaches. Was very Europe centric. So there's differences in terms of regulations, power constraints, the amount of capital that's flowing into the regions. But it's been super interesting to see what's consistent and what's not. About a year ago, I launched a podcast called the Data Center Go-to-Market Podcast that's designed to give the 5 or 6 different kinds of stakeholders on go-to-market teams a voice, regardless of where they sit in the data center ecosystem, regardless of whether they're from operators like hyperscale, edge, colocation, modular wholesale providers, or from technology companies or facilities, or more in this your segment, more in the construction, real estate, and investment, as well as even there's a very vibrant outsourced sales and marketing segment as well in the data center, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure ecosystem.
Interesting. So what is the big, what are the big, like, other than everything's on fire and we can't keep up with demand, what are the other big challenges? Other than Gino needs to build some more stuff faster. Like, come on, Gino. We need more supply. But other than that, what are the big challenges you think?
I see a lot of co-location facilities that are 2, 3, 4 years old that were planned, designed, and commissioned before anyone knew who Sam Altman was. And as a result, there's an interesting, people did granted know who Sam Altman was 10 years ago, but not like the rock star celebrity he is today. Same thing with Jensen Huang. Like, I remember coming from the MSP consulting system builder world 25 years ago, like, yeah, NVIDIA was known as a graphic card developer. It wasn't, right. No one foresaw that they'd be running the world right now. But I see a lot of legacy co-location facilities that may be prematurely facing obsolescence unless they get a second life in edge, because then all of a sudden now they can handle non-intensive workloads where their location is of a lot of value. I talk to a lot of people too that are doing making significant investments in renewable energy projects, like, fuel cells and natural gas, because the predominant, when power comes up in the US, it's a grid availability issue. When power and energy come up in Europe, it's all about sustainability and efficiency, and a lot of what's forcing rethinking PUE and how efficiency is measuring is starting in Europe. And a lot of the founders and startups that are gaining traction over there are trying to figure out how their go-to-market playbooks and what they're figuring out comes to the US, because ultimately they know that's a much bigger market than anything that they're working with in Europe right now.
Yeah.
Josh, I had a question about that. And we don't have the luxury to have functional obsolescence in data centers. We have to refit them, regear them, restructure them for the change of how data centers are operating now. Just because I have a number of course, we're a couple of years ago when everything was 10, 20, 50 megawatts. 80 megawatts was a big deal. Now everything is like, we're starting at 200, 500 megawatts. Oh, sorry. Did you lose me? Because I'm still seeing me.
No, we're still here.
Oh, sorry. Stephen did. Anyway,
could you tell us about Europe more and kind of the differences, I guess, on what you're seeing there versus here and what's going on?
Yeah, for example, there's a couple of, over here they might be considered operators. Over there they're positioning themselves a little different because they don't want to be boxed into being seen as co-location operators. Like, for example, there's a company based out of the UK, Deep Green Technologies, that got famous in Europe for talking about how they were going to use data centers to heat swimming pools. So they're taking basically the excess heat, they're building a co-location data center right next to there, and they're using the excess heat to basically run the energy requirements of health club and fitness facilities, which all of a sudden not only saves a ton of energy, it makes people happy that country isn't moving towards data centers taking up more than 10% of energy, and all of a sudden you can have subsidized fitness facilities empowering people to use these facilities that weren't in the past. Heat reuse is actually something that I see being actively used in the Nordics as well. It seems to be most interesting in countries that have a legit winter. I don't see heat reuse having that much immediate application in Miami or San Diego,
Austin,
or Houston. Yeah. But eventually, when you talk to people that are making inroads here, like Minneapolis with a harsh winter, Boston, even Seattle, there could be some significant application. I think there's a project at early conceptual stages in San Jose.
West Bank.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Resi Builder building a data center attached to their residential project.
Weird. Okay. All right.
And if it's not pools, it's hot showers.
The new mixed use is resi with data centers.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it changes the nature. It changes site selection for sure.
Yeah, it does. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that Stockholm specifically has designated locations that they want you to be at so that they can reuse the heat for homes. The primary issue with some of that is that it's not super, what they would say, high quality heat, because it's hotter than the outdoor temperatures and stuff, but it's not like you're going to boil water with it or anything. It's 10 to 20 degrees
Regulate
warmer.
or regulate it or control it, right? You can.
Yeah, so there's
Get heat.
I know there's a little bit of challenges around that, but I agree with you. I think that I think it works really well in those really cold markets. I think it'll be tough to make it widespread, like you said, in especially in the US everywhere.
Yeah. Well, before we go, hi Gino. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Amy?
Introduce yourself, buddy. Thanks for coming on the
Sure.
show. I know you're busy.
Yeah. So Gino Ginesto Romazote with Excite Group. Joshua, it's been a minute.
Yeah,
It's
it's
my
great to see
internal
you.
place. Yeah, good to see
Great
you
to
as
see
well. Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I invite a new guest on the show, everybody knows everybody. Like it's like the smallest world ever.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen you in a second. Oh, how are the kids? It's awesome.
Yeah, Steven, I think it's been a year since we've met with Howie out in the Bay Area,
Yes.
but good to see you as well.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, so great to be here. Always a
So-
very interesting conversation.
Yeah, before that, we were talking about how AY just put out their data center market report, and they talked about in Q1 construction slowed down a little bit, but everybody was just saying it was a breather, like everybody was taking a collective breath so they could start doing it again. Are y'all feeling that? Or y'all just didn't slow down?
Yeah, globally, certainly, from just because there's a lot of clients chasing the same workloads. Let's just put it that way, right? So some of those workloads have been put in pause, for multiple reasons. I think some of the usual suspects have been putting things into pause by design. I don't think this was. I think this is a cycle that we've seen from them periodically pop up and kind of hold the breath and then rethink things and before they're redeployed. But the demand for the underlying data center traditional workloads of your traditional CSPs, network, storage, et cetera, that continues to be very robust, and that's growing at a healthy pace, and those projects are continuing to move forward. Some of the AI stuff is being looked at with a greater degree of scrupulation, if you will. Nobody knows what the future holds, right? So everybody's trying to figure out what is going to be the best way to build so that it can have multi-use, a multi-purpose functionality. Some have historically been very wise to not utilize the entire space and understand that things might change in the future. So some have done right. Some have double down on what is the current technology that is going to dominate the marketplace, and all those things I think are kind of taken back and taken into consideration and now being evaluated with a different lens as things change. And I don't think it's uncommon to see that. And then again, I don't want to go on record saying, hey, you know what, some of this stuff looks like market manipulation.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think there's a lot of I'm gonna make sure I get mine, and I'm gonna I don't want my plans to be disrupted. It's sort of the order of business that we see today. So I think we're going to continue to see some of this ups and downs, but you're basically have the pulse of what's happening, and you understand the tribulations of the market. I think everybody would agree in this call that the underlying data center business is still humming quite robustly globally. You're going to have this discrepancies from here to well into 2035 and beyond.
Yeah, for sure. So no one is doing any sort of spec development for data centers, right? And so they all already have their end users before they start pushing dirt, pretty much. Or people actually.
Yeah, it's very rare that we're seeing spec, and a lot of times what it'll be like if QTS is building a campus, they'll kind of build their retail building spec that's like a 36 megawatt data center, and the first 6 megawatts are going to be built, and then the rest will be built kind of as it comes, and then the rest of the campus, whether it's 200 megawatts, will be pre-leased to a hyperscale company. And so they'll build sections of non-pre-leased things, but it's very specific co-location providers in specific situations. But for the most part, yes, everything is leased before it's built across the board.
Okay. And are there certain sectors that are happening more? So like healthcare, is happening more, the financial sector? Are there certain real estate or businesses that is leading the data center development, or is just everybody, insurance? I mean, you know what I'm talking about? Are there certain customers that are like want more co-location than others?
Yes. So it can kind of be client specific because and market specific. So certain markets have more technology or energy sector. Like if it's Houston, it's energy sector. I think that it's Minneapolis has a lot of healthcare stuff. Yeah. Chicago, New York have lots of finance. And so, but I think that it kind of depends as well, because there's hybrid approaches on this. And a lot of these groups have been very reliant on the cloud. And so a lot of times when the cloud grows, it could be because of a specific industry, whether it's insurance or healthcare. Government. And so, but it's it kind of depends. I would say that all of those industries, especially healthcare, and some of that is growing around this. But I mean, lots of groups are adopting AI as well and kind of utilizing AI for more. I think that what the latest articles have spoken a lot about is how much Microsoft is using AI for code. And so 30% of their coding is coming from AI right now. And so I think that these other adoptions of AI are also kind of driving some of that demand as well. But I would say basically every industry is still growing that's using documents online, that's using the internet. Healthcare is high among them. Yes.
Yeah. Gina, so the other thing, I'm glad you came on, because we were talking about Joshua brought up the topic that anybody who came and built a data center 3 years ago basically has to look at the hard fact that they might have to retrofit it, because it's like, it doesn't meet today's AI workload and stuff. Are you seeing any of that on your end?
we shy away from things of that nature, just because I mean, for the right client, we'll do anything, but the certainty is that there's plenty to go around for traditional workloads that needs to be leased, and you can maybe retrofit a hall, or maybe retrofit or maybe even build an addition that is maybe purpose built for AI or something to that effect, that would have higher densities or something to that nature. I don't think it's necessary to retrofit the actual data center footprint, because you're still going to need network, you're still going to need storage, you're still going to need, your cloud services, still going to need, your software as a service solutions to be able to dynamically provide the services that have been replaced from retail over to the cloud, right? So you're going to have those businesses continue to grow. I mean, they're growing, and they're growing exponentially. So, we're not even talking about more specific workloads like data lakes and data mining and things that are a little bit more sophisticated in that nature. But you still have a mix of use cases for the data center space. Granted, the example that Stephen provided, I think it's very smart to have a traditional data center co-location space, multi-use for multi-tenant purposes, and then some hyperscale deployments, because everybody wants to be close to the hyperscales. So that works, right? That makes a lot of sense, because we're all feeding from those CSPs, we're all feeding from the AI applications. So we either build it ourselves or we consume it from the powers that be. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Howie, when y'all are you find a new site that has power, and it's the coolest thing since sliced bread, and you got it because you're cool like that, and you're a broker, and everybody wants Howie as their broker. How long is it taking you to kind of get an interested party in that? What's the days on market for?
Is that why you don't return my calls, Howie? No, I'm kidding, man. I'm only kidding. Everybody's calling me, man. Come on.
It's a constant flow. We're constantly talking with all the groups, and we're showing sites. Everything has a different characteristic to it to make it work. One of the things that we're everything is speed to market, and we talk about how can we bridge that gap to utility power that's 3-4 years out. And we look at natural gas for turbines, and a lot of these hyperscalers are looking at alternative ways to power their data centers to get up and going within a year from natural gas. So it's we do talk to everybody right away. And we get offers pretty quickly, but it's finding the right group that has the right plan for the sites, because everything is different. And again, we have a lot of time between that. Hey, we've got a site, we have approved power, but it's going to take us 4 years, 3 years to get that power to the site. So it's a pretty strategic plan to get that up and going. And I don't know, have you Gino, have you done any of that work where maybe there's bridging the power gap until you get utility on site, and maybe modular?
Yeah.
Short answer.
It's a little bit more sensitive than that, fortunately.
I know you can't share. We all can't share certain things we work on, and we're really careful about what we talk about, because our whole life is an NDA.
Yeah. So to answer your question, there's a lot of that going on in the marketplace. Yeah,
Josh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Gino. I had
Go ahead,
two gentlemen on the podcast a couple of months ago. The episode dropped about 2 weeks ago. Lloyd Fussell and Jesse Webb from Genesis Power Systems and Jira. And they're talking about being able to get deployments up in like 6 months to a year. Their site selection is leaning heavily to place facilities near railroads where there's natural gas and fiber, with the idea that they can run a line and power a couple dozen megawatts off a turbine generator they potentially would need diesel as regular backup. I guess fuel cells could be backup, or eventually when utility grid becomes available, that could potentially become backup. But yeah, they're looking at being able to cut the time quite dramatically. They're relatively new to this space. Most of their history as a company comes from fracking, drilling. But they're seeing a lot of demand for that. So yeah, that wasn't under NDA. That was on a regular podcast.
Yeah, I thought that was a good, and you know, but everything has to have a path to power is what we have experienced. Because if anybody could tell me, give me a site that is 100% islanded power, not attached to the grid, and has no intentions of being attached to the grid. We don't have that yet.
Well, one of our stories was that, but it's in Ireland. So, you know, those Irish people, they're really weird, but it's only like 30 megawatts too. So it wasn't like a gigawatt site, but yeah, they're doing it all off of wind. They're doing the whole site off of wind. It must be a very windy area. It must be
it better be windy. Sorry.
Are you guys aware of what happened in Spain?
No. Oh, where they all lost power? Spain and Portugal completely, the whole country lost power.
Must have been a weird weather situation.
Yeah, it was odd. But then Portugal, basically, what I found out about that whole story was that Portugal doesn't generate any power. The whole country does not generate any power. It comes from Spain. I was like, so if they go out, basically the whole country goes down. And Lisbon is a tech hub, so I am surprised that Portugal doesn't produce any or make any power, generate any power. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, that's similar to Singapore, which is one of the biggest data center hubs in the world, and they have, it's a big city state. Basically, it's not huge, but it has lots of people, it has lots of wealth, and it has lots of data centers. But they import all their power, and so that's a tricky situation. But I'd agree with Howie on the fact that we haven't really seen it in the U.S. We haven't seen the users. They really want a long-term grid solution, and they like the backup power of nat gas or solar or wind, but they aren't willing to be fully reliant on that yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a small group, ECL, is really putting a foot forward. I think Dean's on the board of that one, Dean Nelson, where they're looking at hydrogen for self-generation. They have a site in Sunnyvale where they're developing, and they're deploying, I don't know how many GPUs in a rack, like some intense amount of GPUs in a rack. So they've got some really cool technology, but they're the only ones I see that are actually focused on sustainable self-generation. And we see a lot of sites that come to us and they go, hey, look, we've got a lot of gas and we're just going to be an island of power, and we're like the providers are just going to turn away from the sites. They don't want them. They want their what I call umbilical cord to the grid.
Yeah, I mean, ECL is a very interesting use case. I'm actually I'm a big fan of Yuval and Guy Moran over there, and the entire team. I think they're doing a phenomenal job at helping the world understand what's possible. But the plans, they're not the only ones in this, right? There are other outfits out there that are doing the same thing. There are others that are taking a different path. All I can say is that some of the smarter businesses have uncovered ways of, we'll privately fund this and make it happen for you, Mr. Customer, and then we'll tie it off with the utility and help you go on your way, so we can bridge the gap until the utility can reach you. And I think that's a business model that is, I think it has legs. I think if we really get to the crisis of a power generation crisis, it could hold the fort. It could hold the fort until reinforcements arrive. So in multiple countries, I mean, Poland is going nuclear again. It's happening, right? I mean, these are conversations where that's coming, and it would be surprising not to see more development being spoken of sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're seeing other approaches too. I mean, I've heard on podcasts, and then also Howie and I had a conversation earlier with people who were talking about how quickly China has been able to just get grid power and how quickly they're getting their projects started and to completion, as far as getting power to sites and getting data centers up and going, and kind of their timelines just being a lot shorter than they are here, because of less regulation.
Are they using coal? Is that why? Have you figured out how they're generating the power?
They're doing a lot of things. They're doing coal. They're doing.
Salt.
Yep. They have newer technologies that they're using that the U.S. created, but it hasn't utilized yet. But also, I mean, they have lower regulations on nuclear and some other things. But I would just say in general, their timelines seem to be a lot quicker. I don't think that means that they're catching up necessarily, but I think long term, there's probably some things that we could learn from them, based on what the people that we're talking with and how quickly things can be moving over there.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of weeks ago where Trump wanted us to start using coal again to make electricity, and I was like,
Clean coal.
The
well,
challenge.
sure, it's clean.
The challenge with a lot of this is if you think about the parallels to people have said over the years, health insurance would be a lot easier if it was nationalized, right? Instead of 50 different ways of approaching this. Is it the same thing with the utility companies? And are we always going to have our hands tied on coming up with a policy that really makes the needle competitive when there's dozens of different entities that potentially have competing ideas on the best way to make these investments? And then the utility companies are reluctant to make these big investments too, because the obvious question is what the billions that are being spent on these facilities, why the big utility companies don't want in on this business. And it largely has to do with their business model and their stakeholders and how they're funded and everything, and having to pass these along to the general public.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the co-ops if they're like that's a thing here in Texas, and if they're electric co-op, their members can. I mean, you're a shareholder in that co-op when you become when you get power from it. They could basically say no if they wanted to. They had a vote if they cared. They actually voted, but I don't know. It's interesting, for sure. Yeah.
There's been these community stakeholders that have popped up the last year or two that historically, when a data center operator went into a new community, they would do like some health fairs, they'd sponsor some little league teams, and it would be enough. Now it's gotten to the point that there's so much more at stake that I'm literally seeing in bigger companies that can afford to, they're carving out buyer personas and campaigns to educate and build trust with like elected officials, regulators, activists.
Doesn't surprise
utility
me.
Companies. It's a much more complex decision-making process now of figuring out where to really put the resources. And I think in a lot of ways, this is going to continue to make the M&A is going to continue to accelerate, because it just raises the bar on what's needed to really run that kind of business successfully.
Yeah, that was one of the stories. If we get to the stories I talked, so someone it talked about there could be a lot of consolidation in the industry kind of going forward, probably as, any sort of constraints happen in the industry, those who have deeper pockets will, snap up people who don't. Are we going to see that? Does anyone think we're going to see some of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, we're seeing a lot of new entrants into the market. I would say because of the boom, we see a lot of companies that are trying to get into the game. I would say that there will be M&A activity, but I kind of don't think it'll reach a monopoly or reach a point where there's like just a couple companies. I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurial people in the data center industry that can take what they've learned at QTS, Digital Realty, Equinix, and these bigger companies and say, hey, we're just going to go raise our own money and start our own. And there's no shortage of investment banks that are trying to spend money on this and equity companies. And so I think there will be more M&As, but I also think that there's so many market entrants that it's not going to fully consolidate at the top. I mean, that's my opinion on it.
Interesting. And we talk about this every once in a while, but it seems to change on a daily basis depending on what's happening out of Washington. But we've got a construction guy on the call. So, hey, Gino, how are those tariffs, man? How's that going? How has that changed anything? Has it changed much?
Tariffs.
Mhm.
I mean, you still have, I mean, all the concerns around the supply chain, right? That's something that we look at strategically, and there are different ways of solutioning for that,
Yeah.
mitigating the risk. But certainly, I mean, it's in everybody's mind. It's simply something that people are taking into consideration. Some of the deals that are being made are being restructured for that reason, right? So, and rightfully so, because now you have to manage risk in a different way. The uncertainty doesn't help, right? To get projects to commit to go. So, I think the capital markets are responding in a way where they're making it less attractive at the moment to access capital, but there's a lot of capital already floating out there that is already being earmarked but still sitting on the sidelines. So I think we're going to see that unfold, and probably it'll unfold in a more disciplined manner. And and I think everybody in this forum is gearing up to be prepared to capture some of the some of that capital hit in the street. But yeah, I can't say more than
I know that's fine.
obvious.
Yeah,
I just say more than the obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that are under construction, I'm assuming those hurt more than the ones that you could at least have, or if you've negotiated, like maybe renegotiate price based off of changes and whatever. But the ones that are currently under construction, I mean, that's what happened when I was developing, but I was developing a different asset class. But still, like if there was any sort of disruption or change or whatever, basically all my costs went out the window. I'm losing money, and it's like driving me bananas. And it's interesting. It's hard because those construction projects don't take like a month; they take years to build. And so I just find it, that's tough. It's a tough spot to be in.
Well, I wonder how much of that is passed through, and right now, as we see rates going up based on low vacancy, if some of that is absorbed from the tariffs and what we're paying.
Yeah. So from our constructability perspective, that is a strategic investment, right? So things are mitigated, risk is mitigated in the forefront, contracts are inked in the forefront. When you start seeing trouble is when those contracts are being broken, right? And that's not something that we're seeing at the moment. But I can't tell you that if it's happening to a competitor or something to that effect. I really don't know. I have not heard any of those rumblings as of yet. But this is a very small and incestuous business, so I'm sure that as soon as somebody hears something, we all know about it very, very quickly.
Gino, my construction days, Gino, I built a 1.5 million square foot shopping center downtown San Francisco. I took over a project. In the contract, there was we couldn't benefit from the increase of escalation of material price. We had a set price. We had to eat it all the way through the whole project.
That's
a bad contract.
We're painful. Yeah.
You're buying steel at $1,000 a ton or whatever.
Yeah.
Just to say something, that's what it's contracted at. If the steel company says, "Hey, you know what? We cannot honor this contract anymore," then there's a lot of problems there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. All I'm saying is that we have not seen that yet.
You haven't seen that now.
Well, aren't most steel manufacturing contracts for data centers in the U.S. currently? Or is that not the case?
No, that's not the case.
Oh, interesting. Maybe it's just the few that I've talked to. If they've said that they're getting U.S. steel. Interesting.
I mean, in the U.S., yes. I'm speaking globally. There's
Oh,
a lot of steel being afforded globally, and we're not seeing this anywhere that I know of.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Very, very cool. So the next kind of topic I wanted to talk about was just around the markets globally, which we're talking global anyway. And there was kind of like who obviously US is going gangbusters at the moment and kind of it typically leads, but I was surprised that it's gone to like 60% of the amount of things being constructed at the moment. I don't know if that's what that comes from. If it's either, there's more regulation in the EU, so that slows things down, or what's happening there. But I find it we're building stuff over here for sure. But India was number 2. That did not surprise me because India is like the largest population and largest country in the world now. So I would guess that India would be close to number 1 or number 2. But it surprised me that 60% of the construction was in the U.S. I just thought that was crazy. But yeah, it's interesting. So what about other regions in the world that y'all are hearing that are, is there any MENA, Middle East, North Africa region, is that starting to come about?
Yes, not nearly as quickly. I would say APAC is still the area. I mean, we're looking at numbers that are saying that Johor had 200 megawatts of absorption, and that's an 850 megawatt market ish, and so that's about a quarter of the market has happened in the past 6 months, and so it's that's outside of Singapore, and so Singapore's still growing, but Singapore's limited, and so it's kind of like hey, Richmond's growing a lot in Virginia and having a bunch of contracts, but that's because Northern Virginia, like Ashburn, and those areas are already so full that it's hard to do more up there. And so I'd say that's a similar circumstance, but I would say that Asia is still growing the quickest. Like you said, India, there's a ton going on there. And we mentioned Europe a second ago, but some of the power challenges still exist, the pricing of power. And I would say that in general, and we may have mentioned this on a podcast before, Europe is making more of a concerted effort than the US as far as protecting everyday citizens on power prices. I think that we're seeing strides on that here in the US, where they're making the big industrial power users pay more of their share. And like here in Texas, the Senate Bill 6 that's requiring, the cost of the grid upgrades to fall on the large load users more so than it is everyday people aren't having to foot the bill, and their power prices aren't changing as much because of the data centers, which I think is good long term. And I think it's good. It's good for the industry, for them not to have the black eye of, hey, everybody's energy prices are going up because of us. But I think in general, data centers have driven a lot of sustainability in the country. And so I think that since they're on the forefront of that, I think it's okay for them to be helping contribute to the grid upgrades.
I haven't heard anything about South America.
You haven't heard anything about South America?
No, it's been quiet down there.
Oh, interesting.
It's South America and Latin America is pretty small. I'd say that most of that growth currently is in Mexico, and there's a little bit in Brazil. But I would say that the biggest expert that I know, is
Canada's got there's some growth there, and we see things going on there, and there potentially an M&A going on up there or some sites for sale. But other than that. U.S.
Toronto's growing.
Let's go America.
Toronto's growing like crazy. I would assume that that would be a big data center hub. I'm frozen.
No, you're good. We heard that.
Good.
but I would say Toronto's tough because the industrial market is also below 1% vacancy, and land is so expensive there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
power is more expensive in Toronto than other areas. So I would see, I mean, we're seeing so much AI talk kind of in that Edmonton, Calgary area because power is so cheap there and land is cheap. I know it's not as shiny of a market as Toronto, but it's similar to like there's not a lot of data center growth in New York City because land's so expensive and power is so expensive that just doesn't make quite as much sense. And Toronto had a lot of growth kind of in that 2019 to 2022. But then a lot of everything that was going to be planned there is already pre-leased. So it's hard to grow much there unless you're really growing 50 miles outside of downtown.
Interesting. Yeah.
You can tie that rationale back to the Nordics, right? So there's a lot of free cooling, access to power, a lot of reliability in the Nordics, right? So it makes sense that some of those workloads would move up north, where you can gain some economies of scale. You can gain some, a more realistic approach to sustainable data centers, because you won't hear of heat capture in below the or above what am I thinking of, the Capricorn and the
Tropics.
no
Yeah.
Like the tropics.
the
Yeah.
tropics. I mean,
Yeah.
but what do you call the parallels? Is one is Capricorn and the other one I forget the name of it.
Tropic of Cancer.
Oh, yeah, the north and
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what you're talking about.
Yes.
I don't know that either.
Yeah, so you're not going to hear like a lot of those use cases being taking place in the around the equator, for that matter, right?
Right.
That's really something that you see when you get north of north of the tundra, if you will, right? So a lot of the sustainable environments that you hear about, they still have that greenwash, if you will,
Yeah.
that is happening in order to make it interesting, right? Were you gonna say something, Steve? Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Steve.
I agree with you, but also with what Amy was saying, I wanted to go back and correct. So you're correct that there is lots of demand in Toronto and Vancouver.
Yes.
Everybody wants to be in those two areas. It's just hard to put those workloads there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's not that the cloud groups don't want more there. It's that it's hard to build unless you're tearing down old buildings and putting up new ones. And so it's but I agree with Gino too. I mean, we talked about free cooling earlier in the call as well.
Yeah.
In what I wanted to circle, bring the whole rhetoric around is what is really happening, right? I mean, like 6 months ago, or a year ago, it was sustainability, right? Are you really hearing that anymore? No, because it's not fashionable to talk about it anymore. But is it going to become relevant in the future? Likely, because it takes those cycles. It's a fashion cycle, like the bottom bell jeans, right? They went away and then they came back and they went again and back again. I don't know, right? So all I can tell you is that some things work and they come back around, but I think the pressures to build sustainably kind of take you way south, which is less populated than north. So you could bet that anything north is probably a better bet for data center development.
Interesting.
Moving forward.
Yeah. And at sustainability, just kind of segueing into renewables and carbon credits. And I've been running this new trend where, sites with windmills on them, that the power is there, they're running it, but it's not being sold. There's no off takers for a lot of these renewables that we built. It's mostly coming from nat gas, coal, and other sort of nuclear. But I'm running into sites where these landowners get residuals off the windmills on their land, but there's no residual because they're not selling the power.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's weird.
Foreclosures. Foreclosures are around the corner.
Well, that's where we said, well, hey, we'll put our data center next to you. We'll draw a lot of power. Just like Ireland.
Yes, exactly. That 33 megawatts that they're going to, solely do off of wind. Great. It's awesome. All right, y'all. That's our show. Look, we're here. It's the end of the hour. We're already here. We like to chat with friends. Josh was our new guy today, and this is how we roll, man. This is how this happens. So every week we just sit and chat all about things data center. So we're going to do our outros, and Josh, you can go first since you are our newbie today. Let people know how to get a hold of you should you want them to get a hold of you.
Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. You can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn. We also publish a newsletter. You can sign up for it directly on our site. It's the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter at www.dcsmi.com. I host a weekly podcast. And Amy's actually going to be
I am.
next week. Looking forward to it.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And Gino.
Well, thanks, Amy, and thanks, everybody. Good to see everybody, as always. You can always get a hold of me on LinkedIn as well, on the Ginez.toromasote@linkedin.com. Thank you. Great being here.
Yeah, it was fun. And Steven?
Yeah, Steven.Schlinker@avisandyoung.com. And then also LinkedIn's great.
Yeah. And Mr. Barry?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Josh, good to have you here this week. It was fun. Gino, as always. Steven, Amy, thank you. On LinkedIn, our quarterly report is out. You guys want it? Come get it. We've got some stats we'd love to share with everybody. You can find it on LinkedIn, or you can reach either Steven and I at AY, Avis and Young. Have a great day.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm Amy Palvido. I am your host. I'm the CEO of Facilimax, and I am the chair of the U.S. PropTech Council. And everyone should join the council, proptechcouncil.com. And it's been a fun show. We'll see y'all next week.
We're here.
Take care.
Amy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.